Atop the Fourth Wall Volume 3 Character Reboot is now available for order in the links below this video. Can't imagine why something with that title would be relevant in today's episode. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Event Comics Month comes to a close with the second time DC rebooted its universe. No, that's an altered timeline with retcons, not a reboot. No, again, it's the same thing. The universe didn't reboot. It just continued on with some altered details. I'm talking about Flashpoint. Wait, seriously? That exists? Huh. But yeah, while I might joke about DC's constant use of reboots and retcons, when it comes to their entire universe, it's only been done twice. A reboot, in my mind, is actually altering the world's history so much to the point that major characters are beginning their stories over again. Sure, not every character was seen as starting anew, but following Crisis on Infinite Earths, we had the Man of Steel miniseries that retold Superman's origin story, Frank Miller's critically acclaimed Batman Year One, and of course Wonder Woman herself starting out as if this was her first appearance ever. Stuff like Zero Hour and Infinite Crisis changed little details about the history, but it wasn't a fresh start rebooted universe. It was stuff like, the murderer of Bruce Wayne's parents was actually arrested, or everybody remembers there was a Crisis on Infinite Earths, or of course, Donna Troy gets another piece of her already too complicated origin story. Full-on reboots these were not. Flashpoint, on the other hand, from what I understand, and of course this could be inaccurate, I couldn't find a source for this directly from him, Dan DiDio had been wanting to do another massive, proper reboot of the DC Universe for years, but he was continually shot down by president and publisher of DC, Paul Levitz. Then Levitz stepped down, Dan DiDio became publisher, and Diane Nelson became the president. With that, he was allowed to do his reboot, just not in the way anyone expected. Flashpoint may have always been that plan, but it's also just as likely that it was only supposed to be a Flash-focused event that got rewritten at the last second to be the starting point of the reboot. From what I can tell reading old interviews, DC was very hush-hush about the event until the news came that it would usher in a reboot, and at that point, that was what the story was about, not anything else. As a certain other video I made while experimenting with the format of the show indicated, I am not inherently against a reboot, just not in the way it happened. The New 52. Just to get you up to speed, you may recall that in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Barry Allen sacrificed himself to stop the Anti-Monitor's cannon. It was one of those deaths in comics that was supposed to stick. And it did. For 23 years. Before Jeff Johns resurrected him for whatever reason. I mean, at least with Hal Jordan, the dude got some bad writing that turned him evil and felt like a betrayal of the character, so him coming back could be seen as rectifying a past mistake. But Barry? I don't think that many people really wanted him back. He had a good death. Wally West was the Flash for an entire generation and proven himself superior to the guy. But yeah, Barry was brought back to life as part of another event comic, Final Crisis, and a follow-up miniseries that retconned his history. His nemesis, Professor Zoom, had gone back in time and murdered his mother, framed his father for the death, which in turn inspired him to become a forensic scientist to really solve his mother's murder. This is really the foundation upon which this event occurs, and all the things that followed after it. But let's try to examine the event on its own to see if it had anything of merit, by digging into Flashpoint. Reading from a trade, so no thorough look at the covers. But just to say, while the covers are not bad, they are kind of meh. They're not bad if this was just a Flash-focused story, but for an event that would have such consequences down the road that we're still feeling them in 2017, they should probably be a bit more epic in scale. Instead, they're very basic and simple. Again, not terrible, but unworthy of the book's consequences. We open with a flashback to Barry Allen as a child along with his mother. There's only one thing I know about life, that Mikey really liked it. Barry's younger self mentions how he would stop and help the two in distress, before cutting forward to when Barry got struck by lightning and he got his powers. I know some things happen by chance, and some things happen because we make them happen. Like disturbing the fish that this guy was hoping to catch. Good one, Barry. You made that happen, all right. The narrator talks about how Barry thought he could finally outrun his past, but that it was going to catch up to him. When Barry came to me for help, I turned him away. But to be fair, he was selling Girl Scout cookies out of season. I'm not the hero of this story. And damn it, when's it gonna be the narrator's turn to be the hero? Barry wakes up from a nap at his job at the police station, but soon realizes something is wrong when the other officers in his department mention Central City's greatest hero, Citizen Cold.
Cool party.
Upon hearing that, and several other names he doesn't recognize, Barry runs out of the office and prepares to change into his costume, but notices too late that he's not wearing his costume ring and tumbles down a flight of stairs. Then again, given this pose he had in the previous panel, maybe when he was brought back to life his speed powers weren't in running, but some kind of aerobic ice skating. His confusion continues as, at the end of the stairs, is his now alive again mother. Naturally, we get a bit of a break for him to just embrace her, since, let's face it, if your mom had been killed by a supervillain from the future and altered your past, you'd probably just want to hug her when she shows up alive again too. Still, once he's over that, he decides to start asking what the hell is going on, especially when he confesses to her that he's the Flash, but she doesn't know what he's talking about. The Flash, you know, the guy who can run fast? Oh right, from those Avengers movies. Didn't he die in the second one or something? Marvel? Oh my god, I've landed in the darkest timeline! From the Justice League. What's the Justice League? Ugh, fine Mom, in your day they were called the Super Friends. She also doesn't know who the hell Superman is. What about Batman? Batman? Well, of course I've heard of Batman. Actual conversation inside of one of DC's executive offices. We soon see that this version of Batman, for whatever reason, decided to paint a big red circle behind the Bat logo on his chest. I don't know, maybe in this universe, Batman was part of Archie Comics' superhero titles. Batman chases a villain called Yo-Yo, finally catching her and demanding the location of the Joker. Where's the Joker? The Joker's in all of us, Batman. It's in you, me, the people of Gotham City. We're all a little bit crazy. I'm not crazy. All things considered, I think I'm a pretty stable individual. I really only do this stuff because I let my gym membership lapse, and it's good exercise. When she refuses to tell him, he tosses her off a building to her death, but she's saved at the last second by Cyborg. In this timeline, the former Teen Titan is actually the premier superhero instead of Superman. He goes up to talk to Bats, saying his help is needed. He initiates a holographic communication with a bunch of other heroes, and it's here where we get our first glimpse of how the tie-ins were handled for Flashpoint. While most of DC's books continued on to try to resolve their storylines before the reboot occurred, there were a bunch of miniseries released exploring the world of Flashpoint, all the different and varied characters that existed within it. Now, I've heard a lot of people praising some of these minis, in particular the one about Citizen Cold, but here's my problem with it. We're basically being thrust into a universe that has this long history behind it, a different history than the one we're familiar with. We're told to care about these characters who are basically in the middle of a story, given how events in Flashpoint play out. So you pick up a book you know nothing about with long-standing characters who have many connections and backstories and history that you may never be able to untangle, and dealing with events and development that you've never heard of before, with situations and conflicts that you have no context for. Basically, it's a microcosm of every person who wants to start reading superhero comics. I should point out that it's great if those minis were actually well written, and if you liked them, fantastic. But to be perfectly frank, I'm not interested in this world. I don't care about this alternate history with these alternate versions of characters. Elseworlds at least try to explore familiar characters in an unfamiliar setting, but there's no hook to this world that makes me want to see how the different events played out, especially since we know they're just going to disappear at the end of this comic anyway. A similar kind of event comic was done a few years prior at Marvel called House of M, but at least in House of M, there's a premise to their world that could make me be interested. In that one's case, what if mutants were the dominant people on Earth and non-powered humans a minority? But Flashpoint doesn't have anything that makes it unique or interesting to explore. What's sad is that I actually usually like stories where characters cross over with alternate versions of themselves and whatnot. Bet you couldn't tell from my show. Hell, it's not made any better when you remember that, as many of you have probably already deduced, this isn't really some parallel universe, it's an altered timeline. The past has been changed, resulting in this world, and it's all gonna get fixed at the end, so by its very nature, it's just a perversion of what's supposed to be going on. But let's get on with it. Barry tries to go see his wife, Iris, but in this timeline, she's with someone else, so he goes back to his mother. Barry doesn't have his super speed anymore, so he asks to borrow his mom's car. You are never getting that thing back, lady. Back over to Batman, we're shown why this timeline is going to hell in a handbasket. While Aquaman has just recently sunk Western Europe into the ocean, Wonder Woman has led the Amazons into a brutal conquest of the United Kingdom. Oh great, history has been altered, but we still had Amazons attack? Both are out to conquer the world, and Cyborg wants to rally superheroes to fight the two empires. The forces bicker due to the conflicts they've had with one another, but ultimately most side with Cyborg, realizing the threat they pose. Except for Batman, who says this alliance has no chance because they're all against each other. They won't be able to work together. And without Batman's support for this group, pretty much everyone else bows out. Again, pretty much the attitude of a lot of DC's executive creative choices. Batman's not in it? Who cares? Barry drives out to Gotham City and to Wayne Manor, now boarded up and seemingly abandoned. However, the Batcave entrance is still where it should be, so he heads down it. Man, oh man, I don't think I ever realized how deep it is. Check out how long that staircase is. No wonder in the Adam West series he just had the bat pole. By the time Batman saw the signal in the sky and went down all those stairs to just get dressed, Scarecrow would have already poisoned the water 3 times over. For crying out loud, there isn't even a safety railing. One trip and it's all over. Don't say it couldn't happen. We already saw it with Barry a few minutes ago. The cave is also a lot sparser in this timeline, mainly consisting of a few mementos, equipment, and a picture of the Wayne family. First time I met Barry Allen, I nearly killed him. He nearly touched my mint edition collectibles. Batman throws Barry around, demanding to know who the hell he is. He stops when Barry calls him Bruce, but we end issue 2 with Batman saying that Bruce is dead, that he watched him die. This is, my God, Batman! You're Martha Wayne! No, it's Thomas Wayne in this timeline. After issue 2 begins with Deathstroke commanding a pirate ship only to be killed by Aquaman, seriously, he even has a little flag with his mask on it and 2 swords, Thomas Wayne starts brutalizing Barry, even breaking his finger and demanding answers. My name is Barry Allen, but like you, I have another identity. I'm the Flash. After I was struck by a bolt of lightning, I became the fastest man alive. And Batman punches him. You weren't fast enough to avoid that, you delusional son of a bitch. Batman's just pissed because he knows Sonic the Hedgehog is the fastest thing alive. As Batman continues to beat him up, Barry just keeps saying that he needs his help since he's lost his powers. All of a sudden, Barry starts remembering things about this world, like the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. He's been thinking this was an alternate reality, but nope, this is indeed his world, just changed. From nowhere, Barry's Flash ring seems to drop from his coat. He figures he can prove his identity by showing him his Flash suit, contained in the compartment of his ring and how it's friction-proof. Not solid evidence, mind you, but it's a start. Unfortunately, when he releases it, it's not his own suit, but Professor Zoom's. Barry thinks that Zoom could be watching them at that very moment, moving so fast he's invisible. The man this uniform belongs to, Eobard Thawne. What kind of name is Eobard? One from the future. The future sounds kinda dumb. He's a scientist from the 25th century who became obsessed with the power I had. He turned himself into his own era's fastest man alive by replicating the accident that transformed me into a living kinetic machine. Considering that meant dousing himself in random chemicals and then getting struck by a bolt of lightning, he wasn't the smartest man alive. He calls himself Professor Zoom, the Reverse Flash. The Reverse Flash? Why would his uniform be inside your ring? And how the hell does it even fit in there? And why am I suddenly talking to you about future people and reverse flashes and people named Eobard when a second ago I was beating the snot out of you? And isn't your finger still broken? Shouldn't you be in constant pain right now? Barry says this is Zoom's way of taunting him, letting him know that he's behind this. Barry gives his backstory, but Bats is only concerned about the fact that Barry called him Bruce when he came in, meaning that in his timeline, Bruce survived. As such, Thomas is wondering about whether or not they can alter time so that Bruce lives. However, Barry also recognizes that he needs his super speed again. We then cut to a subplot meant to advance a tie-in issue as Secret Agent Steve Trevor is captured by Wonder Woman and interrogated. And since it really has no bearing on the story, let's just skip to the next part, shall we? So Barry has to recreate his powers by strapping himself to an electric chair, dousing himself in the same chemicals as had happened before, and gets struck by lightning during a thunderstorm. Brilliant plan, Barry!
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Batman, of course, points out how insane this is. That's how I became the Flash the first time. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice. That's a common myth, Thomas. Lightning can strike the same spot multiple times as it travels along the path of least resistance. I mean, you're Batman, right? Batman's a scientist.
It's not Batman.
So yeah, they set up their little system to make lightning flow into him and have the chemicals hit him at just the right time, and his body catches on fire, and he's left with burns all over him, ending issue 2. You know, I still haven't watched the Flash TV series, yet I am quite familiar with a phrase that some of its fans have taken to. Damn it, Barry! As we enter issue 3, the President informs Cyborg that since his efforts to recruit superheroes to stop the Amazons and Atlanteans have failed, he's sending in troops. Back at the Batcave, Barry is somehow alive, and looking quite bulky actually, underneath the layer of bandages he's wrapped in. Well, look at it this way, dude. You may not be the Flash, but you could make a career out of being Marvel's living mummy. This plan was so terrible, though, that Barry wants to try again. He says he just needs a bigger bolt of lightning. Oh good, there might still be a few millimeters of flesh that haven't been cooked yet. Barry says that his memories are continuing to alter, that if they don't do this soon, he'll forget all about things being wrong. Or that he won't remember his wife, or your son. You're right, Barry. We must eliminate the rock and roll music that killed my son! Wait, what? What, is that not how it happened in your timeline? Thomas helps him back into the chair, but before they can set it all up again, a huge bolt of lightning comes down and strikes Barry, blasting Batman away. Unfortunately, as we can see, it doesn't give him super speed, just really cool new contact lenses. Nah, it does indeed restore his speed. Meanwhile, subplot that's only relevant to the tie-ins. Next scene! The super speed quickly begins healing Barry's injuries. Batman gives him Zoom's costume. You need a suit, and I'm not about to lend you one of mine. I mean, let me tell you something, it is not frictionless in the crotch area. Barry refuses to wear Zoom's suit, so he quickly uses the materials in the cave and manor to build a new one. So now the two have to get to work and use the Bat computer to work on a solution to this. And by Bat computer, I mean this one dinky little PC that Thomas has not in the cave, but in the library of the manor that he probably uses to play World of Warcraft in his off hours. Is this the only computer you have? Yes. I mean, I had an iPad, but let me tell you, I hate touchscreens. Batman wonders why Zoom could alter history, but Barry can't. Simple science. For every positive, there is a negative. Not so simple science. Thawne is powered by a negative speed force, one he creates by corrupting the speed force energy I generate. The negative speed force gives him a variety of abilities I don't have. He can manipulate his own age, deteriorate objects with a touch, and he can change the past.
Of course! Don't you know anything about science?
This is taking forever to boot up.
It's a different kind of world. You need a different kind of software.
Barry does have the ability to time travel, but altering history is a bit trickier. It's like trying to swim up a waterfall. Time actively fights against someone changing it. It can be done, but of course altering time also has unintended consequences, aka the butterfly effect. Barry figures that Zoom must have created multiple changes considering just how much has been altered, though. He knew that without any other speedsters around, Barry would go to the Justice League for help. so he went around taking them out of the equation. Hal Jordan never became Green Lantern. Instead, Abin Sur is still in the role. Batman's changes are obvious. Aquaman and Wonder Woman aren't going to be convinced of any of this. But then there's Superman. Instead of landing in farmland, his rocket landed in Metropolis, killing 35,000 people on impact. I think in time travel terms, we can call this a butterfly cluster crap. Batman contacts Cyborg and, knowing full well that nobody will believe Barry's story, tells him he's willing to join his hero coalition, but only if he picks the team. Barry is unhappy about the lying. It's easier this way. It's faster. And after you fix whatever your enemy did, none of this will matter anyway, will it? Did it ever matter to you? Well, I'm rich, and instead of being at home in warmth, I'm stuck in a bat costume in the middle of a rainstorm, so I've got to imagine... yeah? Cyborg is able to identify that the rocket was taken by the government and transported to an underground lab, wherein they started Project Superman. The three bust into the underground lab, knocking out the few guards the facility has at this point, and find Superman, who sadly is not himself. He's in a cell with red sunlight holding him back, and he's a twig. Supes is not taking all this well, but Barry says they're here to help, and, as more guards arrive, get him outside to the sun. Unfortunately, after he unintentionally uses his heat vision to melt a guard's gun, he flies off in a panic into his own tie-in miniseries, ending issue 3. Entering issue 4, the three heroes are rescued from the guards by Element Woman, a character Jeff Johns wanted to promote because, as he said, he likes to give some spotlight attention to characters he loves, but are otherwise ignored by most other people. And of course, she's completely superfluous. Here's the thing. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, there certainly were plenty of characters who were kind of given importance earlier on, but ended up being pointless to the plot. But Crisis was trying to show off the full history of the DCU, and it had 12 issues to breathe and let a few characters briefly get the spotlight because it was possible they'd never be seen again. Here, it's a 5-issue series, and characters like Element Woman don't do anything that important in this story, so it's just a waste of page space. Maybe if she had had a larger part of the story, like a character arc that tied into not wanting to alter the timeline back because of losing all that she is or whatever, it'd be fine, but instead she's just there. Also, she doesn't get her own tie-in miniseries. Great job promoting the character, Jeff. Something of a cool concept is where the heroes go to recover from their battle. To a bunch of kids. In this timeline, DC's Captain Marvel isn't one guy, nor is he called Captain Marvel, but anyway, he's actually a combination of 6 kids, each one who embodies one of the gods who make up the name Shazam. They get at least some decent character stuff, but nothing too much of note. Also, Batman kicks down their door instead of just knocking or sneaking in, because that won't attract any attention or anything. They've gone to the kids because they once helped another superhero prevent his mind from deteriorating by using the Shazam lightning, and Batman is hoping they can do the same for Barry, whose memories are becoming more and more integrated into this timeline. Billy Batson tries, though he also sees images of the regular timeline and is naturally a bit confused about that. I saw a different world. A world with hope. The hope that I might someday be called Captain Marvel again. The group overhears a news report that the military strike against the Amazons has failed, met by an armada of invisible jets. What's more, Aquaman has begun his assault of the Amazons, making a massive tidal wave strike the UK. It seems like the end of the world, and Flash wants to do something about it. People are dying, and he can't just pretend it's all gonna be wiped away, even though, as Batman points out, well, it will be wiped away. Flash has a good point, though. Even if they find Zoom, figuring out how he altered the past might take forever, and they might be stuck with this world. Batman refuses. Either we change this world, Flash, or we let it burn in hell. Like father, like son, Bat-Dick. Barry tells Cyborg they need to mobilize the heroes, but Cyborg says they won't come without Batman, because of the urban legend built up around Batman over the decades. I know he's just a man in a costume, but everyone else sees him as something more. They've heard the stories and believed them. They think Batman's invincible. This Batman is an asshole who started much later in life than Bruce did, probably couldn't put in the same kind of dedication and time into his training, is much older than Bruce, and has a computer that consists of something that probably still runs Windows 95. He doesn't even have a giant penny or a dinosaur in the cave. How the hell did he build up that kind of legend about himself? Bruce would have come. And Thomas agrees. Hey Thomas, get me some coffee.
Get your own coffee, Barry.
Bruce would have gotten me coffee.
Cream and sugar?
After summoning the other heroes of this world to come to their aid, we cut to the direct battle between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. I don't know the full deal between them, and frankly, I don't care. The two apparently had a relationship together, yet Aquaman also had a wife, and Wonder Woman murdered her. Whatever. The heroes arrive. Aquaman apparently has some kind of bioweapon. Cyborg mentions it out of the blue, and Flash tells him to shut it down. Unfortunately, things soon go pretty badly as the Enchantress, the DC version, not the one you may recall from Secret Wars, turns on the heroes and reverts Captain Marvel back into the Six Kids. Wonder Woman murders Billy Batson, and issue 4 ends with Professor Zoom arriving in front of the Flash. Oh, Barry. Look what you did. Turns out he put a kick me sign on the suit the Reverse Flash is wearing. And so we enter the final issue. Zoom explains that he didn't change the timeline. Barry did. A short time after learning that Zoom had murdered his mother, Barry decided to try to fix it, traveling back in time to try to stop Zoom. Unfortunately, in trying to do so, he ended up putting the entire Speed Force inside of himself. And somehow this resulted in time becoming broken, creating this altered timeline. Barry himself is responsible for all of this. So, Barry, is it too late for you to go back to being dead? I'm just saying, things seemed kind of fine without you, man. However, Batman realizes that this just makes this a lot easier. They just have to get Zoom out of the equation, and Barry can travel back in time again to prevent himself from doing this, and we are all our own grandparents or whatever. New problem, though. Zoom gets ready to kill Barry. He's never tried to kill Barry before because he needs Barry Allen to live a long and full life so that his own timeline would be secure. However, Barry's actions have caused Zoom to become a living paradox, outside of space and time, and therefore if he kills the Flash now, his own future won't be affected. I can hurt you, but you cannot hurt me, Barry. The legendary Flash cannot hurt Eobard Thawne! And Zoom gets stabbed through the back with a sword. What about me? What about you? What about your hands and that sword? Jeez, Thomas, each of your hands is as big as your head, and that sword is almost as tall as Zoom is. Doctor's advice, when you're in the middle of a war, don't stand still. And Eobard is a stupid name. Your future is dumb, and you should feel dumb. Although Zoom is dead, the battle is not going well for the heroes, severely outnumbered and now dealing with a powerful sorceress. Fortunately, reinforcements arrive. People from the other tie-in miniseries in a moment that's supposed to feel epic and exciting, but with this 2-page spread given to Grifter and the Resistance, but of course is otherwise meaningless since they've only shown up once in this comic and have otherwise played no other role in it. Superman returns to help out after Batman is blasted, and instead of a bioweapon, Cyborg is now saying that there's some weird seismic activity that's beginning to crack the planet in half. The Flash's memories are once again getting replaced too, so yeah, everything is going to hell and it's not getting any better. As such, a dying Thomas tells Flash to just start running. This world is doomed and a better one is going to replace it, so he needs to leave now. He gives a note to the Flash to give to Bruce when the world is restored. Dear Bruce, your friend made me strike him with lightning twice. I don't want you hanging out with him anymore. Barry starts running, but suddenly thinking about his mother sends him out of his focus, causing him to land right on his mother's front doorstep. He explains the situation to her, and she does get it, especially since the news is saying that, yep, the world is gonna end. Barry thinks there has to be another way to save both her and the world, but she has a very simple question. How many people died because of this? Just saying, son, I'm okay if a few eggs get cracked for this omelet. Like 10 tops, but still. When Barry admits that it was millions, she reminds him that she couldn't be prouder of him, and that even if time is erased, the life she spent with him did happen and it wasn't wasted. And so Barry goes and intercepts himself before he can try to save her, altering time back, but not in the way it was before. As he's traveling through the time stream, he suddenly notices 3 timelines. One containing characters from DC's Vertigo imprint, one from the Wildstorm universe, and the last being the regular DC universe. A mysterious figure says that the history of heroes was shattered into 3 long ago, splintered to weaken your world for their impending arrival. You must all stand together. The timelines must become one again. And thus the New 52 was born, merged from those 3 different worlds. Because somehow Grifter teaming up with the Justice League makes the gold in Wonder Woman's outfit disappear. The character we see here was later named Pandora, and man did she turn out to be a letdown. More on that later. Barry wakes up as he did in the beginning, in the police station where he works, only it's back in his mostly proper timeline. Barry later heads over to the Batcave and meets with Bruce, and we can notice that both he and Batman have Go Faster lines on them, as part of the New 52 redesigns. Barry tells Bruce about everything that happened. The whole world changed because you tried to prevent your mother's murder, and it was on the brink of destruction before I changed it back. But now everything's back to normal, as far as I can tell. Good, because I need to get back to work on defeating my new nemesis, One Face. Barry chastises himself over his selfishness. Don't beat yourself up, Barry. If I had your power, I would have tried the exact same thing. And don't think I haven't thought about it. You would travel back in time to try to save my mother? Well, to be perfectly frank, Barry, she is kinda hot. Dude, not cool! Barry still has full memories of the alternate timeline despite being back in this one. Bruce says that he should just cherish those memories. And of course, Barry gives him the letter given by Thomas, and the brief glance we get at its contents reveals that the narration from the first issue was actually the letter. It's a clever, very well-written bit, except we never got the full text of that. Otherwise, it just ended with, like I said, I'm not the hero of this story, and spent a chunk of time talking about how awesome Barry is. Still, we do see the very end, where Thomas says he loves him. And so our comic ends with Bruce thanking him for this, and it's a very sweet moment. Just a wild guess here, but I'm assuming he also didn't mention how he broke Barry's finger. Flashpoint is okay. It's only just okay, and that's its real problem. There is nothing egregiously wrong with it. It's not badly written, the pathos are genuine, and the artwork is overall solid. The issue, though, is that this event created a massive reboot of the DC universe, and it's just a Flash storyline. There's an attempt to make it seem more epic with the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman causing the Earth to explode or whatever, but it's barely window dressing. Even those other events I mentioned at the beginning that many people said were also reboots, 0 Hour, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, they tried to show off how epic and grand a scale their events truly were and how important they were. But Flashpoint is pretty much focused squarely on Barry Allen, with the other characters just existing as supporting roles in his story. It was his actions that caused all this, his enemy that's blamed, and he is the one given the most development. As a Flash storyline, it's fine. Nothing great, but enjoyable. As an event miniseries heralding the next major development in the DC universe, it's mediocre at best. The biggest development of Flashpoint was, of course, the New 52. Barry thought that everything had returned to normal, but of course it had not. Pandora, the character who appeared in the time stream, for whatever reason, since as far as I can tell, none of her abilities have anything to do with the time stream, would eventually have her backstory revealed, and it had nothing to do with any of this. Long story short, she's inspired by the mythical Pandora who released evil into the world and played a slightly larger part in the build-up to the event comic Forever Evil. That was it. The character appeared in the background of every first issue of the New 52, hinting at how important she was as part of this crap, and she was just set up for an entirely different crossover that she wasn't even a main character for, that spun out of a Justice League crossover, and gah, the New 52 was dumb. Another version of Thomas Wayne would appear in the book Earth 2, DC's attempt at reviving the Justice Society in a modern context that had mixed results. In that reality, Thomas Wayne had also survived the mugging, but went into hiding. His murder had been orchestrated by crime lord Falcone, whom Thomas had many connections to, and thus his death was meant to protect Bruce from further reprisal, while also giving him the leeway to get vengeance on him. Bruce of that Earth eventually discovered his father was still alive and a murderer, and disowned him. He took up the mantle of Batman after Bruce died in a fight against Darkseid, then eventually really died in the event comic Convergence. Speaking of Convergence, which I talked about during the Blue Beetle retrospective, representatives of the Flashpoint Earth were present during that. As a reminder, it pitted different parallel universe versions of characters against one another in order to make one universe survive. The Flashpoint Wonder Woman took on a pre-New 52 version of Wally West and his children, getting her ass kicked by the Speedsters in a very good story. story. Like I've said before, the tie-ins to Convergence were excellent and gave some closure to these characters, but let's talk about Wally for a second. Wally West was erased from the New 52 for whatever reason, eventually bringing him back in rebooted form as a black teenager. Except not really. Convergence spelled the end of the New 52 branding, but not the universe itself. And in fact, at the time of this recording in May of 2017, the New 52 timeline is still around. But there's been a bit of a change. DC Rebirth, the initiative that began last year, started with a one-shot that told the story of a time-displaced Wally West trying to return to reality while stuck in the Speed Force. During this, he explained that Wally West is actually his cousin. Both Wallys are named after the same great-grandfather. It's a nice way of having your cake and eating it too. Fans of the new character won't be alienated, and fans of the old one get theirs back. But anyway, when Wally encounters his uncle, Barry's memories of him are reignited, and he pulls him into the New 52 world. Wally still recalls existing in the pre-New 52 Earth, but he also has been incorporated into this world, and yet still reveals that no, Barry didn't create the New 52 universe when he resolved the Flashpoint. Some force intervened, stealing away 10 years from everyone in the DCU. And all evidence points to the one responsible for that being Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. I made a long text post on AtopTheFourthWall.com talking about my feelings about it at the time, if you want to go check that out, and about why I think they did it, and at the time of this episode, that's definitely where they seem to be heading with it. There's one last thing to mention, but because it's so recent, I'll keep it brief to avoid spoilers. The Flashpoint timeline apparently stuck around for whatever reason, and in the 4-part Flash and Batman crossover, The Button, Bruce gets to meet Thomas and fight alongside him. It's seemingly finally erased now, but we'll see where things go from here. And thus, Event Comics Month comes to a close. I'll probably do something like it again in the future, although that might get in the way of the annual retrospectives, since, let's face it, this month kinda ballooned into a lot more work for me, as you can tell by the fact that some of these episodes were late. Hey, almost like this was an event comic! However, next time, we're moving away from event comics and over to tie-ins of a different nature, as we look at the comic book tie-in to one of my favorite sci-fi series of all time, Babylon 5. So, during the final battle in Flashpoint, a cybernetic gorilla Grodd appears out of nowhere with a team of apes in one panel. Out of curiosity, if this was your first comic book ever, would the sight of this sudden group of apes out of nowhere with no context make you less inclined to read comics, or more so? Gotta admit, probably more so for me.